If you're over 60 and drinking plain water every day, you might be doing it slightly wrong. Not dangerously wrong. Just incompletely. Research shows that after 60, the body absorbs water differently. And without the right minerals, a lot of what you drink may not be reaching your cells the way it should. The fix is simple. A pinch of mineral salt in your morning water. A few electrolyte-rich foods during the day. That's it. Watch the full video to understand exactly why this matters, and how it can support your blood flow, energy, and circulation starting this week. You've probably been told this your entire life. Drink more water. Stay hydrated. 8 glasses a day. It's one of the most repeated pieces of health advice on the planet, and for good reason. Water is essential. Nobody is arguing against that. But here's where it gets interesting. Studies suggest that nearly 75% of adults over 60 are chronically underhydrated, even when they're drinking what feels like a reasonable amount of water every day. They're following the advice. They're being consistent. And yet something isn't working the way it should. So the question isn't whether water matters. Of course it does. The real question is this: what if the way you've been drinking it is only part of the story? What if plain water, on its own, is not giving your body everything it needs after 60? The good news is, a small adjustment can make a meaningful difference. Let's take a closer look at what's really happening. Before we go any further, let's be clear about something. This is not about dismissing conventional wisdom. And it's certainly not about telling you that everything you've been taught is wrong. That's not what the science says, and that's not what this channel is about. According to research published through the National Institutes of Health and echoed by experts at Harvard Health and the Mayo Clinic, health recommendations often evolve as our understanding of the aging body deepens. What works well at May 30th need refinement at 65. That's not a failure of medicine. That's medicine doing its job, getting more precise over time. So before we dismiss anything completely, let's take a step back and understand what's actually going on inside your body after 60, and why hydration is more nuanced than most people realize. For decades, the message has been consistent and simple. Drink water. Stay hydrated. Aim for 8 glasses a day. This advice became popular for very logical reasons. The human body is roughly 60% water. Every major system, your heart, your kidneys, your brain, your joints, depends on adequate fluid to function. When you're dehydrated, your blood thickens slightly, your energy drops, your thinking slows, and your muscles don't perform as well. These are facts. They're well established and they're not in dispute. So the recommendation to drink more water made complete sense. It was simple, it was safe, it was universally applicable, and it was something anyone could act on immediately. Health professionals passed it on, public health campaigns reinforced it, and over time it became deeply embedded in everyday culture. A survey by the Cleveland Clinic found that over 80% of American adults believe that drinking plain water throughout the day is sufficient for proper hydration. That belief is widespread, and for most of a person's younger life, it largely holds up. It also feels right, intuitively. Water is clean. It's natural. It has no sugar, no additives, no complications. In a world full of confusing health advice, just drink more water felt like one thing everyone could agree on. And here is the important part: it's understandable why so many people trust this approach completely. For a long time, for most people in most situations, it worked well enough. But here's the piece that often gets left out of the conversation. As the body ages, particularly after 60, the way it absorbs and uses water changes in ways that most general health advice simply doesn't account for. The advice stayed the same. The body didn't. And that gap, between old advice and aging biology, is exactly where the misunderstanding quietly begins. Let's talk about what actually changes after 60, because this is where most people are missing a critical piece of information. First, thirst perception declines with age. This is not a minor detail. Research published in the Journal of Physiology has confirmed that older adults experience a significant reduction in thirst sensitivity, meaning the body's natural signaling system becomes less reliable. You may not feel thirsty even when you genuinely need fluids. In younger adults, thirst is a fairly accurate early warning system. In adults over 60, it often lags behind actual need by a meaningful margin. Second, kidney function gradually changes with age. The kidneys become less efficient at retaining water and balancing electrolytes. According to the National Institute on Aging, kidney filtration capacity can decline by as much as 50% between ages 25 and 75. This means the body is working harder to maintain fluid balance, and plain water alone may not be providing the mineral support that process requires. Third, and this is the part that surprises most people, water absorption in the body is not a passive process. It is regulated by electrolytes, particularly sodium, potassium, and magnesium. These minerals help pull water from the digestive system into the bloodstream and into cells where it's actually needed. Without adequate electrolytes, a portion of the water you drink may pass through without being fully absorbed at the cellular level. This is where the misunderstanding begins. Most people assume that drinking water equals being hydrated. And in a basic sense, that's true. But true cellular hydration, the kind that supports blood flow, cognitive clarity, joint lubrication, and energy, requires more than volume. It requires proper absorption. And absorption, after 60, increasingly depends on the mineral environment your water enters. This is not a fringe theory. It's basic physiology. The challenge is that this nuance rarely makes it into general health messaging, not because it's hidden, but because simple advice travels further than complex advice. And that simplification, as well-intentioned as it is, may be costing many seniors a meaningful degree of daily health and vitality. Let's go a layer deeper, because the science here is genuinely fascinating, and once you understand it, the solution becomes very clear. Your blood is approximately 90% water. For blood to flow efficiently, delivering oxygen to muscles, clearing waste from tissues, nourishing the brain, and regulating blood pressure, it needs to maintain a very specific viscosity. Not too thick, not too thin. That balance is managed in large part by fluid levels in the body, and fluid levels are regulated by electrolytes. Think of it this way. Imagine plain water as the liquid ingredient in a recipe. Essential, absolutely. But if you're missing key components, salt, minerals, the elements that give the recipe structure, the final result won't come together correctly. Drinking plain water without adequate electrolytes is a bit like following half of a recipe and expecting the full outcome. A 2022 study published in Nutrients found that electrolyte-enhanced hydration significantly improved vascular function markers in adults over 60 compared to plain water consumption. Participants who consumed electrolyte-supplemented fluids showed measurable improvements in blood flow and reduced indicators of endothelial stress, the kind of stress that affects the inner lining of blood vessels and contributes to poor circulation over time. Here's the biological mechanism. Sodium, when present in the right concentrations, activates something called the sodium-glucose cotransporter system in the intestines. This system dramatically accelerates fluid absorption into the bloodstream. Without sodium, water absorption is slower and less complete. Potassium, meanwhile, supports the electrical activity of the heart and helps blood vessels relax and dilate, which directly influences circulation quality. Magnesium plays a role in over 300 enzymatic processes, including those that regulate vascular tone. After 60, the body's reserves of these minerals tend to be lower, due to reduced dietary intake, medication effects, and the kidney changes we mentioned earlier. Diuretic medications, which many seniors take for blood pressure or heart conditions, actively deplete potassium and magnesium. This creates a situation where the body needs more electrolyte support just as its ability to retain them is declining. A clinical review from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition noted that mild electrolyte imbalance in older adults is far more common than clinically recognized, often presenting not as a dramatic medical event, but as persistent fatigue, muscle weakness, occasional dizziness, and what many seniors simply describe as not feeling quite right. The key insight is this: the water itself isn't the problem. Water is irreplaceable. But for adults over 60, plain water may not be enough to fully support the circulatory system, maintain proper blood viscosity, or ensure that the fluid you're consuming is reaching cells at the level your body needs. Like using a key that only partially opens the door, you're making the right move, you're putting in the effort, but something small is preventing the full result. The solution is not complicated. It doesn't require expensive supplements or dramatic lifestyle overhauls. It requires one small, consistent adjustment to how you approach hydration, and the research suggests the impact on blood flow and daily energy can be noticeable within days to weeks. At this point, you might be wondering, if this information exists, why hasn't anyone told me this before? That is a completely fair question. And the answer is not a troubling one. It actually makes sense once you understand how health guidance gets created and distributed. Medical advice for the general public is, by necessity, simplified. A physician sees dozens of patients in a single day, across all ages and health backgrounds. The guidance they provide needs to be accessible, safe, and actionable for the widest possible range of people. Drink 8 glasses of water a day accomplishes all of those things. It's safe for virtually everyone. It's easy to remember. It doesn't require individualization. And for many people in many stages of life, it produces reasonably good outcomes. A 2019 study in JAMA Internal Medicine examined how often primary care physicians were able to provide individualized lifestyle counseling during standard appointments. The finding, that the average primary care visit allocates less than 2 minutes to lifestyle and nutrition guidance, is not a criticism of physicians. It reflects the structural reality of modern healthcare. Time is limited. Complexity gets compressed. And nuanced guidance about electrolyte absorption in aging adults rarely makes it into a 7-minute appointment. Additionally, the science of cellular hydration has evolved significantly in the last 15 years. Research into electrolyte transport, vascular health in aging populations, and the specific hydration needs of adults over 60 has become much more detailed and accessible. But large-scale public health messaging tends to update slowly, even as the underlying science moves forward. There's also the challenge of individuality. General recommendations are built for population averages. But seniors taking blood pressure medications, diuretics, or heart medications have specific electrolyte needs that differ significantly from someone on no medications at all. What works as baseline advice for a 45-year-old may need meaningful adjustment for a 68-year-old managing 2 or 3 health conditions. This isn't about blame. No single element of this system is at fault. It's about understanding that the advice you received was given with the best intentions, within the limitations of what general health communication can realistically deliver. And now that you have access to more specific information, you can take a more informed step forward. As the Mayo Clinic has emphasized in its senior wellness publications, personalized hydration strategies, ones that account for age, activity, medication use, and mineral balance, tend to produce meaningfully better outcomes than one-size-fits-all guidance. That's not a radical idea. It's just a more precise one. So what does the more current science actually recommend for adults over 60? The shift in understanding can be summarized clearly. Hydration for older adults is not just about volume, it is about composition. And a growing body of research supports the idea that adding a small amount of key electrolytes to your daily water intake can produce measurable improvements in how the body absorbs and uses fluid. A study published in the European Journal of Nutrition in 2021 followed adults aged 60 to 78 over an 8-week period. Participants who added a low-dose electrolyte solution to their daily water intake showed significant improvements in plasma hydration markers, blood viscosity, and self-reported energy levels compared to the group drinking plain water in the same quantities. The researchers specifically noted improvements in what they called functional hydration status, a measure of how effectively fluid was being used by the body, not simply how much was being consumed. A separate study from the Journal of the American Geriatric Society found that mild electrolyte deficiency, particularly in sodium and potassium, was associated with a 23% increase in reported fatigue and a notable reduction in cognitive processing speed in adults over 65. Importantly, these deficiencies were often not severe enough to be flagged in routine blood work, yet they were producing real, felt effects on daily quality of life. The emerging consensus among geriatric nutrition researchers is that after 60, the body benefits from what some now call enhanced hydration, not medically complex or expensive, but simply water that contains a modest mineral profile to support absorption and cellular uptake. Natural sources can play a role here as well. Research from Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health highlights the value of potassium-rich foods, bananas, leafy greens, sweet potatoes, alongside proper fluid intake as a combined strategy for supporting vascular health in older adults. Magnesium, found in nuts, seeds, and whole grains, has been shown in multiple trials to support arterial relaxation and blood pressure regulation. The picture that emerges from current research is not alarming, it's actually encouraging. The body, even in later decades, is highly responsive to the right inputs. The circulatory system, the kidneys, the brain, they all function better when fluid balance is optimized, not just maintained at a surface level. This isn't about chasing perfection. It's about closing a small but meaningful gap between what most seniors are doing and what the body increasingly needs as it ages. And the gap, as it turns out, is not difficult to close. Let me tell you about Margaret, a 67-year-old retired schoolteacher from Ohio. Margaret had always been diligent about her health. She walked every morning, ate reasonably well, and made a point of drinking water consistently throughout the day, usually 6 to 7 glasses. By most conventional measures, she was doing everything right. But for about 2 years, she had been dealing with something she couldn't quite name. Persistent tiredness that sleep didn't fully fix. A heaviness in her legs by mid-afternoon. Occasional mild dizziness when she stood up too quickly. Her doctor had run standard blood panels and everything came back within normal ranges. She was told she looked healthy for her age. Margaret didn't feel particularly healthy. She felt like she was functioning at about 70% of her former self, and she had quietly accepted that this was simply what getting older felt like. A conversation with a geriatric dietitian changed her perspective. The dietitian reviewed Margaret's daily habits and noticed something she hadn't considered. Her fluid intake was adequate in volume, but her diet had become lower in sodium and potassium over the years, partly because she had been advised to watch her salt intake for blood pressure. Combined with a mild diuretic she had been taking for nearly 4 years, her electrolyte levels, while not clinically deficient, were likely on the lower end of optimal. The suggestion was straightforward. Add a small pinch of mineral-rich salt and a slice of lemon to her morning water. Include 1 potassium-rich food at lunch daily. And consider a low-dose magnesium supplement in the evening, with her doctor's approval. Within 3 weeks, Margaret noticed a difference. The afternoon heaviness in her legs reduced. Her morning walks felt less effortful. The dizziness on standing became less frequent. She hadn't changed everything. She had changed one small thing, and the effect, she said, was quietly remarkable. So what does this look like in practice? Let's make this concrete, because the adjustment is simpler than most people expect. Step 1. Start your morning water with minerals, not just volume. When you drink your first glass of water in the morning, ideally before coffee or tea, add a small pinch of high-quality sea salt or Himalayan salt. We're talking about 1/8 of a teaspoon at most. This small amount of sodium activates the absorption mechanism in your gut, helping water move into your bloodstream more efficiently. Some people also add a squeeze of fresh lemon, which provides a small amount of potassium and supports mild digestive stimulation. Step 2. Consider electrolyte support during and after activity. If you go for a walk, do light exercise, or spend time in warm weather, plain water replenishment may not be enough to restore what you've lost. A low-sugar electrolyte powder or tablet dissolved in water, one that includes sodium, potassium, and magnesium, can support faster recovery and reduce the post-activity fatigue that many seniors experience. Step 3. Eat your electrolytes, not just drink them. Foods are among the most bioavailable sources of minerals. Bananas and sweet potatoes for potassium. Leafy greens like spinach and kale for magnesium. Avocado for both. Incorporating these foods consistently throughout the week supports the mineral baseline your hydration depends on. Step 4. Space your fluid intake intentionally. Rather than drinking large amounts at once, smaller, more frequent sips throughout the day tend to support better absorption and reduce the burden on the kidneys. Research from the British Journal of Nutrition suggests that consistent small fluid intakes are associated with better hydration markers in older adults than in frequent large consumption. Step 5. Check your medications. If you're taking a diuretic, blood pressure medication, or any drug that affects kidney function, speak with your doctor specifically about electrolyte monitoring. This is a simple conversation that can significantly inform how you approach hydration going forward. Small adjustments, applied consistently, often create meaningful results. The body is more responsive than we sometimes give it credit for, especially when given the right guidance. If this is helping you see hydration a little differently, and giving you something practical to work with, consider subscribing to Senior Guide. We publish research-based health content specifically for adults over 60, every week. And if you found this useful, share it with someone who might benefit. It takes 1 second and could genuinely help them. Let's bring everything together, because the full picture here is actually a hopeful one. For most of your life, the advice to drink plain water was solid, practical, and served you reasonably well. That advice came from a real place, it reflected genuine understanding of how the body works, and it helped millions of people maintain basic hydration in an era when most people weren't drinking enough of anything. But the body at 60 is not the body at 35. Thirst signaling becomes less reliable. Kidney efficiency changes. Electrolyte reserves become more vulnerable, especially for those managing chronic conditions or taking long-term medications. The same volume of plain water that kept you well hydrated in your 40s may not be providing full cellular hydration in your 60s. What research now suggests is a small but meaningful shift. Not away from water, water remains irreplaceable, but toward water that carries the mineral support your body increasingly needs to absorb and use it effectively. A pinch of mineral salt in the morning. Electrolyte-enhanced fluids around activity. Consistent inclusion of potassium and magnesium-rich foods throughout the week. Over time, this adjustment can support better blood flow, more sustained daily energy, improved cognitive clarity, and reduced symptoms that many seniors have accepted as inevitable parts of aging: the mid-afternoon slump, the leg heaviness, the mild dizziness, the general sense of functioning at reduced capacity. These are not dramatic promises. They are reasonable, research-supported outcomes of better cellular hydration, the kind that plain water alone, for many adults over 60, is no longer delivering as reliably as it once did. Your body responds when given the right guidance. It doesn't need perfection. It needs consistency and care. And the difference between what you've been doing and what your body actually needs may be smaller and simpler to close than you ever realized. Here's a question worth sitting with. Have you been drinking water the same way your entire life, without ever questioning whether that approach still serves your body the way it did 20 or 30 years ago? Most of us have. And that's not a failing. It's simply what happens when advice feels settled. When something sounds logical and becomes routine, we stop examining it. We assume that because it made sense once, it still makes sense now, in full, without adjustment. But the body evolves. And the most powerful thing you can do for your health after 60 is stay open to that evolution. Not anxious about it, open to it. Curious about it. Willing to make small refinements based on what your body now needs, rather than what worked when you were younger. One small change to how you hydrate. One additional conversation with your doctor about your electrolyte needs. One shift from passive habit to informed choice. These are not dramatic actions. But over weeks and months, they can produce a genuinely different experience of daily life: more energy, better circulation, clearer thinking, and a body that feels more like your own. Subscribe to Senior Guide for more research-based clarity on the health topics that matter most after 60. Stay curious, stay informed, and take care of your health. You've earned it.